Welcome, everyone. Welcome to those that are following us on Facebook Live. Welcome to those here on the Zoom webinar. It is a pleasure to have our two guests for another one of our Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute. That's PBBI from California State University, Fresno, and a part of our PBBI FLAD Fresno State lecture series for the spring semester of 2022. Just a little bit before we introduce our guests and we have them talking a little bit about themselves and more importantly, read from their work. We're very excited to have both of them on today. And we thank all of you that are joining us here on Zoom. And we thank all of you that are joining us on, as I said, Facebook Live. And also these events are all recorded and they're all archived at the Fresno State PBBI YouTube channel, but as well as through the Henry Madden Library at Fresno State as part of the Portuguese oral history collection. Not just the oral histories, of course, that we do in different folks' homes throughout the Central Valley and even a little bit in Northern California and Southern California as well. But although we concentrate on its Central California Portuguese American Oral History Project, but also these presentations, also these forums and these colloquiums with writers, with different panelists about the Portuguese American experience, they're who we are as a culture integrated into American mainstream multicultural. We're very proud of the work that we're trying to do at Fresno State. Being Fresno sometimes is not very well known throughout many parts of the world. The Fresno State is a university with 25,000 students, getting up actually to 26,000. And Fresno sometimes is not known until people know a little bit about it. It is the 10th most diverse city in the United States of America. And we're very proud of that diversity and part that the Portuguese American experience is also part of this diversity that is lived throughout this part and our entire state of California. So once again, welcome to each and every one of you. We are commemorating our third anniversary. PBBI was formed in 2019. And we have, although hit by a pandemic about a year after we were founded, we've moved some things online, and it's given also different opportunities such as tonight's event. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you and to have here with us both two writers from the Portuguese American world, basically American writers, but with a Portuguese flair, as I like to say. And there's always a little bit of the ethnic part of it that sometimes one may read and say that's just what a lot of other writers of the American world experience and talk about. But there's always something there. And I always recall this one instance that we had just about a year ago when we formed this community of writers, the Cagarro Colloquium at Fresno State that we were building upon. And we had a young man from the Azores as one of our guests in our first presentation. His name is Cristóvão. If you are ever online and you want to hear some unique music, Cristóvão is a folk singer from the island of Terceira in the Azores who sings only in English and creates all of his songs and does a wonderful job. And he was listening to these, I believe we had 5 different poets and writers from the East Coast and West Coast of the United States. It was a national event. And after he listened to each one of them present one of their pieces of work, most of it poetry, and once a bit of a short story, he said, are you sure none of you have ever been to the Azores? Because you're talking about themes that we here that are in the creative world talk about all the time. And it's kind of this interesting nexus because most of the writers that were at this event were either second or third, and one of them fourth generation. And so, but yet the themes are still there from generation to generation. So thank you all again for those in attendance. Thank you for those following us on social media. And we're going to start with Tony. I've asked both of the writers, Tony and Tyler, to take a few minutes first to introduce themselves and give us a little bit of a bio. I think it's better if they talk about themselves and a little bit about how they got into writing. And then after we have Tony and Tyler do those brief intros, then we'll again have each one of them read a little bit from their work. So Tony, if you'll do the honors.
Sure. Thank you. What you just said reminded me of something I used to hear when I was a kid, which was in the Azores, they used to say, if you want to see how we lived here 20 years ago, go to California. They're still living that way.
Indeed.
um, so I'm Tony Roma. I immigrated in utero from the Azores. I was born here. My parents were married there. My mother had immigrated here. My grandfather had brought his family here when she was 13, 14, and they came to the Bay Area. That was following 100 years of grandfathers who had come to the peninsula in San Francisco and Marin to work at the dairies. And they would come here, work for a few years, and then go back and, buy property with the money they'd earned and that kind of thing. And my mother was here as a teenager, went to school, went back, met my father, and that's how I'm here. I grew up in San Leandro, and it was a very, very strong Portuguese community as I was growing up. One of the many places in the East Bay where you can encounter large communities of Portuguese, Hayward and Fremont and Newark being others. And I was just very fortunate to be raised in this group of amazing great uncles and aunts who sat around the dinner table telling stories all the time and recounting things from the old country. And it's something that's ingrained in me in that way through that family. And in high school, I got lots of comments about my writing, and teachers suggesting that I follow that through in some way and make something of it. The same thing happened in college. And if it weren't for my Uncle Louis and my Aunt Madeline in Folsom, who invited me to go live with them and complete my education at Sacramento State, I might not have taken all the courses in literature and writing that I'd taken and continued on that path. We lost my Uncle Louis last week to cancer. And so, I am eternally grateful to both of them, and it's a great loss for all of us. But he also left us with his stories and lots of humor. And there's stories about the old country, there are stories about the immigration experience, and there are stories about, just settling in here and making a life in their own way. As you said, the typical American stories, but with that flavor of that background. And I'm very fortunate to have that. Eventually, it led me to various workshops and programs that I attended, one being the Disquiet program in Lisbon, which I was lucky to attend the first one, which is magnificent. I have lifelong friends and writer colleagues from that. I know you've met many of them and had them speaking on your programs. And professionally, I've gone into technical writing, which is an entirely different thing. But I get to use words. I get to think about an audience. So there is that. And then I still keep my fiction writing and some playwriting as a sort of a hobby on the side.
Wonderful. And we'll explore a little bit of that in our conversation after the reading, because you gave some fascinating information that I would like us to revisit if it's okay with you.
Absolutely.
And thank you so much, Tony. And Tyler, a little bit about your bio, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. So I was born in Castro Valley. My mom was born in San Lorenzo, and her parents came from Flores in the 50s and 60s, respectively. Grandma was passed away before I was born, and then my grandpa died of a heart attack when I was in middle school. So unfortunately for me, my connection to my heritage was kind of cut short, so to speak. But at the same time, I think it also probably sparked my interest in Portuguese later in life, because it was something that I found myself longing for, just, I guess, personally, as well as, I guess, maybe spiritually and philosophically. So my mom was a Holy Ghost queen for the festas, and which she was very proud of. And then my grandpa knew Carlos Almeida as a teenager when they met in San Miguel. So they were both quite young, and they maintained that relationship throughout their time here in the Bay Area. And then I was referred to Denise from Enrique at the PHPC, and I've purchased and read through about a half a dozen books there. So all very, very enlightening, and making me have to engage with a language that I'm not too familiar with, but learning slowly but surely. For my education, I went to San Diego State. I majored in communication. So a lot of the courses I was taking were rhetorical theory, argumentation theory, not so much of a writing background. I was actually probably much more math oriented growing up, but the writing passion was something that came later after I spent a lot more time reading. I had a professor at San Diego State, Dr. Dianasopoulos, who said you can lose your car, you can lose your house, you can lose your wife, but what you study will stay with you for the rest of your life. And I think that really hit hard. And that's what actually probably got me to read with the kind of interest that I had in college, as well as what kept me reading, and then eventually that sparked my interest in writing. And so I basically spend a lot of time on campus doing my homework and reading in between classes. Initially, I thought I was going to get into entrepreneurship because I wanted to, save the world like most people. And I thought that, building a business would be the way to do it. But the more I got into it, I found out that it might be a lot more of a headache, and I might not be as lucky as the Bill Gates and Steve Jobs of the world. And so they both had people help out. But yeah, one of the first books that really sparked my interest in entrepreneurship and education in general was called Borrowing Brilliance by David Cord Murray. And I think now it probably wouldn't hold up to what I experienced at the time, but it was one of those just formative books. Same with the Autobiography of Malcolm X, or The Biography of Malcolm X by Alex Haley. And those are both just two books that turned me into a reader, which then I guess led me to becoming a writer. And then some other biographies that were important were just kind of, Elon Musk and Richard Branson for entrepreneurship. And then I read a bunch of kind of Eastern philosophy books, as well as just kind of the run-of-the-mill self-help books. Sorry if I'm reading, I have notes off to the side here. And then so getting into writing, I spoke with my cousin Adam, and he recommended that I basically set some goals. And at the same time, I had a friend recommend a commencement speech by the late David Foster Wallace called "This Is Water," which he gave at Kenyon College. And that speech, if you haven't listened to that, I mean, it'll take up a little bit of time, and in his word usage is a little bit on the heavy side, but it was just a transformative speech for me. And that's what made me decide that creative writing and, just pursuing just art in general in whatever form that might take is a worthwhile venture. So that's kind of what embarked me on my first writing project, which was called the Millennial Meditations. And I worked on it for several years, and I shelved it pretty much before COVID hit. And then COVID hit, and I was planning on taking a break from writing, but then I was like, well, what greater opportunity to just sit inside and not be around people. So that's what started me on this second writing project, the Light y Escuro. And so, a couple other just references for writers that have influenced me. And then I'll talk about, I guess, my philosophy after I do a couple of readings. But William Blake, Borges, Pessoa, obviously, and I think that's about it. And I already mentioned David Foster Wallace, but I mean, I think that's roughly it for my background in the community.
Thank you, indeed. And just for reference to those of you who are following us, that Tyler mentioned, first of all, the island of Flores is a unique island for writers. Believe it or not, it is. It has a very rich history. And this year, in the fall semester of 2022, we hope to have hopefully in-person event. If not, it will be on Zoom, to commemorate the 100th anniversary, 100th birthday of one of Flores' greatest writers, and probably one of the greatest poets of the Portuguese language, also, and certainly from the Azores, Pedro da Silveira, who wrote this very short poem called Aida, the Island. And it's very, very short, but it's one of the most powerful poems about the Azores and about immigration. And also, Tara mentioned the name Carlos Almeida as being friends with your grandfather, if I'm not mistaken. And for those of you who have never heard of the name, Carlos Almeida is an icon in the Portuguese American community in California. Was the Supreme Secretary and the CEO, what we call today the CEO of the UPEC, União Portuguesa do Estado da Califórnia, for many, many years, one of the premier fraternal organizations in California. Wrote a book about the UPC and about the Portuguese in California, which is a must read as well. Thanks for those references. So we'll go back to Tony and Tony, before you read your piece that we're very excited to hear, I've had the privilege of reading a couple of pieces from you, and they're wonderfully done, and you certainly have used your technical part for lit, and very, very well, very creative with language, and I think as you will all see that in just a bit. So you said that you went in, writing became something that was important to you, and that became part of, maybe some teachers in high school talking, hey, you can do this. And high school teachers, if they're good high school teachers, that's what they do. They empower you to go after some kind of a passion, because most students in high school don't even want to be there. And so if you can find the student's passion, it's a good way for them to be in yours and other classrooms as well. But also, how important was those, or how important and how has it influenced you, the stories that you said you heard from your uncle and other uncles and aunts at the dinner table, this unique custom and tradition that unfortunately has been forgotten in some families. And we are living in a 21st century different world where the dinner table can be just mom goes to Jack in the Box, and the kids drive out to the pizza place or wherever. And so there's not this strong tradition that the Portuguese American community had, especially 40, 50 years ago, and even 20 years ago, and in some cases some families still do have that, which is that storytelling time, whether some of it was fiction or not, but times in the old country, and how you moved through America during your first years. How important was that storytelling in shaping you as a writer, basically?
Yeah, it was very important, and it shaped me as a human being as well, because again, growing up in San Leandro, we were the other there. I had friends who were sort of, we used to call them white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, and my friends' parents used to make comments about the Portuguese parades causing traffic and this kind of thing, but it gave me kind of a place to be safe, a place I was familiar with. And in fact, we're getting together on Saturday, a few of us, and I'm sure my uncles are going to tell stories and my mom is going to tell stories. That's what we do. But it certainly, it connected for me, not until my 30s, I think, even though I was writing before that. The stuff with teachers telling me to write, and in my mind, with the blue collar background that I was surrounded by, it's like, okay, you finish school, you get a job. Writing as a career didn't make any sense to me at all, and it took me a while to understand that. And really, it was just the love of literature that connected to that experience again of my family. It brought that same kind of feeling of bringing through characters and stories and meaning in people's experiences, particularly the works of Anton Chekhov, his short stories, and Sherwood Anderson, Winesburg, Ohio being a prime example of that. And there was just something in their work, and then later Saramago, that I just found so much humanity in, and realized that that's what my family carried, that there was this bond that we all have in some way. And it was there, and that's when things connected for me.
Wonderful. So I'm not going to continue the journalistic piece here interview. We're just going to, or the oral history interview. We want to hear, of course, your writing. So Tony, tell us what you're going to read for us, just a little, and we're looking forward to it.
Great, thank you. Yeah, this is a story called Boys. It's a short story, and I had written a longer story, and then this kind of came out of that, and I felt it stood well on its own, and so I kept it on its own, and I'll present it to you now. Dad was supposed to pick us up on Saturday. As he usually did, he had called late in the week to announce that he would come by and take us out for the day. Sometimes he would show up. Other times we would wait, clean and dressed in proper clothes, and the designated time would go by as Mom's bilingual curses escalated in volume and intensity until she let us go back to our rooms, change our clothes, and go play. On that Saturday, we'd been waiting for about 10 minutes, and Mom had just started cursing when he honked the horn of his little blue Mazda at the curb. The face-to-face shouting had all been done when our parents lived under the same roof. Now their paths rarely crossed. Mom's shouts were never heard outside the front door, and he didn't shout at all. Dad was a charming mess. He smoked, he drank too much, he gambled. Mom said he once bragged about being a womanizer, but she thought he was full of shit. Sometimes we didn't see him for months. And the only time we were sent into the house with a check or some cash for child support was when he had won at the track. But he was also playful and positive and could sing a warbling melody that would make everyone around him smile. He loved sports, as my brothers did, and put up with my lack of skill and interest with a lighthearted teasing and coaching that mostly hid his disappointment. He loved us, he just didn't do it well. We loved him with our guard up. He had come to this country with my mother, leaving his family in the Azores Islands to follow hers. While our grandfather had immigrated to secure a better education for his family, our father followed the immigrant's dream of riches. He was an excellent soccer player and looked the part, handsome, slim, angular. But he rejected a spot on the Oakland Clippers when the coach told him it would take time before he would be on the field. He had no patience for people who did not recognize his worth as he measured it, never realizing that this lack of patience was diminishing his value every time he walked away. He would be rich someday, he said, not through pennies and dimes. He said he had no regrets, and he would say it often. Hello, hello, what's new, he sang as we climbed into the car, and he tousled our hair. We go to the museum today. How about the museum, huh? We shrugged and smiled and nodded. I'm gonna stop for a pack of smokes, he said as he drove us out of the neighborhood. You want some gum? Want some gum or something? We pulled into the 7-Eleven on Davis Street and climbed out of the car. At the counter, with the sound of the bell jingling on the door with every passing customer, my father asked for 2 packs of Winston. He pronounced it Winston. His Portuguese accent tripped and sharpened the English words that formed over it, hardening the THs and this or that to become this or that, or opening vowels to a beauty that we could hardly imitate. And these guys are gonna get gum. Come on, choose one. These people are waiting. He took the white pack of Wrigley's from my right hand. I still held a green one in my left. You want this one or that one? I nodded and placed the green pack back into its paper tray. Come on, he said to my brothers. Both, Danny said, red vines and bubblicious held up in the air. Dad laughed and shook his head. Both? Both. Peter stood on his toes and slid a package of beef jerky onto the counter. Jerky, he said. No gum? Dad asked as he tossed a 50 on the counter. Peter shook his head. No bag, Dad told the cashier, handing us our treats. They take it. Danny shook the bell on the door as we exited, and Dad swatted him on the back of the head. At a red light, Dad craned his long neck to look in the rearview mirror and asked Peter, what is that? Beef jerky, Peter said, chewing in wide open bites. Beef, Dad said. Why do you get beef? We're going to have lunch later. Beef. You did not have breakfasts? We did, we all chimed. It's a snack, I said. When I spent time with Dad or our grandparents, I was often drafted as a translator. So I felt the need to explain when there seemed to be a cultural confusion. Mom rarely had such difficulties. I worked a foil gum wrapper between my fingers. Dad plucked it from my grasp and flicked it in his ashtray among the ashes and cigarette butts. It stirred the ugly smell of the dead things. What you have for breakfasts? Eggs, linguiça? Dad asked. Cereal, Peter said. I flinched, knowing criticism was coming, and said, we wanted cereal. Nah, you eat good breakfasts. Cereal is no good, he said. It's good for my stomach, Danny said. Dad laughed. Good for your stomach, huh? He laughed and laughed. I fumbled around with a pack of gum in my hands. He asked, you share with your brothers? I turned to the back seat to two shaking heads. I got gum, Danny said. Share with your brothers, Dad repeated, tapping a cigarette in the ashtray. The smoke swirled back and up and around our heads in the blue upholstery. It smelled good, better than the ashtray. At the Oakland Museum, Dad handed the woman at the counter a $100 bill. I held my breath, hoping she had change. Everywhere we went, from the zoo to Children's Fairyland, Dad paid with large bills. If a cashier asked if he had something smaller, he would somehow clench the air around us and say things like, come on, you have no change? Maybe that lady or that guy, pointing to anyone who passed behind the counter. This time, change was provided without question. Dad handed us our ticket stubs, and we were in the museum for about 20 minutes before he decided he needed to smoke. Watch your brothers, he said, stay here. He left us in the natural history area, where I was viewing a miniature diorama of the East Bay foothills in the 18th century. The curved, textured surfaces were dotted with models of animals, deer, foxes, coyotes, and people, colonists and Native Americans, some who appeared to be skinning a deer for a hunt. Others were separated from the hunting party, one pointing to a small group of Spanish missionaries and soldiers at the top of a hill. One soldier had a hand on his sword, and the missionary carried a staff with a cross. An Indian on the slope was standing straight, looking in their direction, but the glue under his feet had come loose, and he was tilted back as if witnessing a vision over the missionary's cross. It reminded me of the trust game that I played with my cousins, where you drop backwards and someone catches you, but there was no one to catch him. I reached into the miniature world and tried to press him back into place, but any remaining glue was loosened, and he fell flat on his back. I started feeling my heartbeat in my neck and my face get warm. Danny and Peter were listening to a recording near a stuffed fox, Peter pulling his ears into points and snaring at Danny. Danny began moving down the display cases, pressing each of the round plastic buttons that started the narration for the coyote, the mountain lion, the bobcat. No one appeared to be watching me. I grabbed the figurine again and pressed him against the hill. He would not stick. I removed him from the display and walked around it, trying to find a place to set him down. If I laid him down on the hillside, it would look like he had been shot by a Spaniard in the field. I was almost around the entire case when Dad walked back into the gallery. I hid the figure in the dampness of my palm. I expected someone from the museum to approach me, hand outstretched, shaking their head as Dad slapped mine, but no one came. Toma conta dos irmãos, rapaz, Dad said, grabbing my arm and chastising me for not watching my brothers. Come on, look at them. He guided me by the shoulder and waved my brothers back to us with a psht. They'd been getting louder and more active, and Peter was jumping and growling at Danny like some other animal he had seen or imagined. Dad swatted at him and herded us along. I slipped my hand into my pocket and kept my eyes down. I wanted to take the Indian to one of the docents or someone at a desk, but I was afraid what Dad's reaction would be. I told myself someone else would have taken it anyway, and maybe the museum had a replacement. I held the Indian tight and twirled it around the way my father jingled the change in his pockets just before he needed a smoke. We left the museum before seeing any other galleries. Dad was eager to get lunch, and my brothers were bored and wanted to go to the park. As we descended the steps of the building, passing between koi ponds and gray concrete architecture to the street where the Mazda was parked, I felt I had crossed the threshold and could not return. The Indian was now mine, and I was a thief, full of regret and justifications. Thank you.
Wonderful piece, wonderful, great imagery, and great thoughts about culturation and indeed a complex world that you described so well. Thank you for that piece, Tony. That was so wonderful. Loved it. Tyler, we'll go to you now and have you share some of your work with us. I think you're going to share some poetry, possibly.
Yes,
Okay.
The collection is, as you know, poetry and prose, but I think for the sake of this reading, I chose all of my poetry just because some of the essays would run on a little bit, but I will start with Crow's Beak. A torn soul dangles from a crow's beak, perched on the parapet, satiating Satan's quota. Too afraid to abstain or confront the crying kid locked inside, dragged along by darkness. Can't turn the clock back to brighter skies when spring sun shimmered and smiled, restoring the spirit with drops of laughter, clarity, cleansing whole, silence, nothing stirs. And then the next one is Animals and Plants. And this one was from September 4th, 2020, just to give you an arc of the kind of the pandemic, so to speak. Animals and plants don't judge me. And when I talk to them, they listen. When I'm upset, they feel my pain. I complain about life's inanities, and they seem to nod in agreement. The next one is Spiritual Poverty from October 2nd, 2020. Why won't you die for what you believe in? Why won't you lie, sores ripe from a beating? Nights which deprive, pockets depleted, sickness of mind, souls wander wide. Cardboard fans sit in stadium stands, and fake cheers pour through the TV. What other absurdities have I entertained? All of our news, spoon-fed and confused, staring at abuse, can't find relief. I don't care about creed and decrees, but I'd prefer a clean ship, wipe the drool from lips, change soiled shirts, and feed the hungry. Instead, we flirt, flaunt, and taunt, ole. What are the likes for if we're spiritually poor? So this next piece is called Absence. It's October 16th, 2020. I'm grateful for nature's beauty, but when I dream, I create anew. Flowers and trees unlike anything that my eyes have ever seen, and yet I cannot smell them. And then one more short one, and then a slightly longer piece. This one is titled If We Don't Read. It's from October 22nd, 2020. If we don't read deeply, our wits will wilt. A petal drops every day that pages lie in wait. Atrophy is the apogee of all organic life. Run and flee happily from the doctor's knife. If we don't read widely, our biases prevail, plagued by recurrent thoughts, egoic jail. When fools rule, history will be a mystery, chastening the parables, protecting pride. So this piece was basically, I owe partial credit to my mom, who was depressed by all my writings up to this point. And so she urged me to write something that was more optimistic, and hence the title of the collection as a whole, The Light and Darkness, to translate it into English. And so this piece is titled Sailing into the Light, and it's from November 29th, 2020. People tell me to write about hope. This isn't the time for dark thoughts. Fine, so be it. I see the light every day, and when I walk in the yard, I smile at the sun enveloping me like a blankie, at the birds bobbing about the branches, at the bunny bouncing by the bushes, and at the trees towering over me, waving. It's sad that people don't know. When tears well on our eyelids and we turn towards the sun, our vision sparkles like the ocean. We don't notice this most of the time because our mind is lost in thoughts, floating about inside our shell, reminding the world of our reality. We spend countless hours fixated on social media and mindless TV, missing the island breeze that blows without Tethys' sublime assistance. We founder on form and function, unable to grasp our goal, because we set sail blinded by bounties. Look, see, the light always shines on thee. Okay, and then, thank you. And then I'll just do a couple more for the sake of, yeah, I have a collection. So the next one is Cycle. It's from December 13th, 2020. Dark clouds before the rain. A chill creeps through the air. After the first drops fall, a fresh scent follows. Several days of dim light leave the soul dismayed. People shelter in doorways, trapped, clutching clothes. Eventually, the clouds part, and the sun shines through, drying up the morning dew, welcoming a warm spring. Birds tweet in the trees, squirrels skitter about, and the hills flourish, obscene, verdantly green. When summer arrives, eyes dry, winter's dead, lovers sit in beams of light, not a single care in sight. Splinters from fallen trees feed the fungi beneath. The cycle continues. All life is on the menu. And then I will skip that one and go on to Can't Compute, February 12th, 21. If life is meaningless, why bother with opinions? If we don't care about life, why worry about death? How will we find peace when we cannot listen to a child speak? All the logic in the world is useless if we keep searching for two perfectly whole sums. We add things together, only to find out later that the recipe called for subtraction. Okay. And then I will skip to, then I'll just skip to the last piece that I selected. Early Flight from September 4th, 2021. There is a half-dead possum in the middle of the road, hunched over, bleeding, and we drove by. It's 4 o'clock in the morning and the sun is still hiding. When I returned to the scene, it was still there, less distressed. By the evening, it vanished. Every driver steered clear. I guess the smoke and holiday sent residents flying away. When I take a step back to shift my frame of mind, I see deceit and trickery, taking advantage, belittling. Evil is the root of all evil, but money feeds the soil. Do they want us to stay inside, slowly rotting our minds? If you want to protect the sheep, build a barn and fill it with hay. They'll come running in, and they'll even let you lay on them. What did the possum desire? To be hit, maimed, hurt? No. Was it trying to solve the riddle? Why'd the chicken cross the road? What was on the other side? Food, shelter, a place for a family, or a drop of water in this arid bay, free from blooming blue-green algae. If it made it to the other side, would it have been satisfied? Eventually, a bright light shines, bringing us to the beginning. Keep your eyes on the road ahead for the peaceful passing possums, or be prepared to clean your car, a truly sad way to start the day.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all those pieces. Wonderful. And one quick question, Tyler. I know that you said that, of course, what you're working on is mostly poetry, but you also are working on some essays as well. So your work includes both poetry and some creative nonfiction.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a couple stories that were, one of them was my father had COVID, and so I basically wrote for 6 nights of just journal pieces of what that experience was like of, my father having COVID, as well as, there's just some other pieces that were also, Tony mentioned Saramago, and I think there's just a lot of influence of the Sailing into the Light was influenced by the Lusiads, and so there's a lot of different Portuguese authors that found their way into the pieces, and so there was a mix of writing styles as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I don't know if those of you who are following us on social media, it's kind of tough for me to look at questions, but on here on Zoom, if anybody has any thoughts or questions, please put them on chat. Thanks to all of you who've had some very nice comments for both Tony and Tyler as well. We appreciate your comments. Thanks to those of you who are following us from the West and the East Coast. I see folks from the East Coast also on with us as far and the West Coast, some writers in the house as well, some poets. Thanks to all of you. Tony, you mentioned a little bit about about this quiet and your experience. Tell us a little bit about that experience in Lisbon. It's a unique program. I know, of course, the pandemic hit it like it hit everything. Nothing survived the pandemic untouched, one way or another. But for those who are following us, whether it be here or Facebook Live, tell us about that program and how that helped you or didn't, or your thoughts of it as a writer who experienced that unique program that I'm a fan of. So I'll already be telling you that I'm biased, but I'm a fan of in Lisbon.
Yeah, it's a wonderful program. The same person who reconnected us was the person who told me about it. That's Professor Duarte Silva, who I have to thank for being here and for again mentioning the program to me, because it was a new program then. No one knew how it was going to go, and Jeff and Una and the rest did a fantastic job. I mean, just an amazing job of putting together and possibly selecting a group of people. Maybe it was serendipity, but what I've heard from people who have gone to programs after the last, it's been 10 years now, 11 years. Is that everyone has a similar experience. It's been it connects people. You find people who you have commonalities with and common experiences with, who you never would have met because they're all the way across the country or in Canada or wherever. You meet amazing writers, and you get to work on your work and listen to other people's stories and their work. And for me, at that moment, I think the only thing I had worked on that related to the Portuguese experience at all, I always felt that my family's experience immigrating here, just that journey alone was worthy of a screenplay, and I'd kind of played around with that for a while. But after going to Disquiet and just realizing how these stories resonated with people and talking about these experiences, and then again, that flood of memory coming back from my family's stories, I focused more on that with most of my writing. And it's just, when you write, it's a matter of meditation and introspection that you can't get any other way. And so just connecting to that experience and that program in that way, it's never left me. I always come back to those characters and those stories in some way.
Indeed, yeah, it's a wonderful program. Thank you for that testimonial, because it is important, and it's important for those who are following us, whatever medium. If you hear about it, if you're a writer, hopefully it'll be up this summer. I haven't heard, but it is a unique experience. I would encourage anyone who is in writing, if you have the opportunity to do it at least once, do it. And thank you, Tony, for that testimonial as well, because it brings you a world of connections, and also it's a unique perspective because of some of also the writers that are there, putting the program together and holding the workshops and everything else. It's really top class. And thanks to the Luso-American Development Foundation, FLAD in Lisbon, who is a supporter of that program, and it makes it actually continue from year to year. Tyler, a little bit about you were talking about your connections, of course, with your grandfather, and I see that there's a couple of comments from some of the daughters of Carlos Almeida. I want to just shout out to them because I knew Carlos Almeida quite well as a young man. I was much younger than Mr. Almeida. I'm already old, but I was when Mr. Almeida was an icon in the community. I was a bit younger than I am today. I had a wonderful relationship with him. I think he's one of the true icons of the Portuguese American experience in California. I think he was a visionary. I think his the putting forth the J.A. Freitas Library at now PFSA, which was in the East Bay, now is in Modesto, California, it is the largest Portuguese library of any Portuguese American organization in the United States. The museum is fantastic, and it was all his vision, his commitment to the Azores and to the Portuguese American experience. So it's interesting how your grandfather knew him well, and Tyler, and how we have two of his daughters here, and we appreciate, of course, that as well, and how these stories all interconnect. And as I mentioned again, to reiterate that, Mr. Almeida, indeed, his book on the UPC and the Portuguese in California is really a very interesting book that's with lots of good information and should actually be updated and republished from my humble perspective. So these connections, do you feel that as a young writer, Tyler, that it would be important, something that actually Tony mentioned about Disquiet, but there's been talk about maybe doing a similar program with Portuguese American writers, or Portuguese American and Portuguese Canadian writers, maybe a North America, or a program it's being discussed now. We don't never know where these things are going to go because these things take investment. But there's a program now being discussed in the Azores as a possibility, kind of like a Disquiet, maybe in a different form, but bringing together new and young writers and writers of all ages, but especially young writers of Azorean ancestry into the Azores, and doing some kind of a program there as well. How important to you, Tyler, would be as a young writer to have these connections with the country of your forefathers?
Extremely important. I mean, I think just to connect with not only the Portuguese but just other writers is so important. In my friend group, I'm kind of the black sheep because most of my friends are just doing other hobbies and activities, and so just as a writer in general, I feel pretty isolated. And then, but yeah, as a Portuguese American writer, even more so. And so, yeah, just an opportunity to connect with people from the islands, as well as, yeah, just writers anywhere around the world. I mean, it sounds like an amazing experience that I would definitely pursue if the opportunity was available.
Sure, and we hope it does become available. This program that's being thought about in the Azores, and we actually like to do something at a different level at Fresno State. I've talked to a good friend who I think is still on, the poet laureate for El Dorado County, Laura Goulart, whose poetry I've been a fan for many years. That doesn't mean that both Laura and I are up in age; just means that we have been. I've been a fan of her work for many years, from a long time. But Laura, I think, and I have talked about this possibility of doing something here, certainly in the West Coast level, and Fresno State is willing to maybe put something forth in the next few months as we transition off of a pandemic. But I think that is one of the opportunities that I believe that we don't have enough. Tony, and you've been writing for a while too, a little bit, which is opportunities to share thoughts and to share comments and to share work and to build upon each other with other writers of our own ethnicity that have not that all writers have things in common. And I mean, I've learned a lot from my friends in the Hispanic world, where we have lots of connections, cultural connections. But I think it would be interesting to have a little bit more of an avenue sometimes for writers to read their work in the Portuguese American world. We don't have that much. We're kind of a little bit still stuck on the Festa, and the Festa is okay, they're fun. But maybe we need to have a literary Festa as well. What are your thoughts on that, Tony? Is there a lack of opportunity? Would it be interesting for you as a writer to have more opportunity to share your work? Of course, you want to share your work with all readers, independently of their ethnicity, but to share your work within your own Portuguese American community throughout California, we're a huge state, huge state.
Yes, absolutely. And I can say again that this is where Disquiet was a great influence. We had and have many people who do put readings together. Millicent Cardi.
Millicent's the best at it. Yes.
Millicent.
Yes.
Luna Patrick, when we first came back, organized a reading in Chicago at AWP. We did different readings at AWP. I've participated in a few of those. And here, Millicent organized a reading, and I organized a reading with Lynette Escobar and Melissa. And I just, it seems like we need to do it ourselves. We need to get it out there, and we had people come, and maybe we need to promote those outside of the community as well. But it's up to us, I think.
Sure.
Yeah, it's up to us to take action, and Disquiet inspired us to do that. As usual, life takes its course, and that energy fades away. But I'm glad that it's coming up in this conversation, because I know another friend of mine, Paula Neves, back in New Jersey, is coming to California probably in June, and she's saying, well, let's organize a reading, when I come out there. So it comes up all the time, and Millicent is the one who really gets things going. And as I said, Melissa de Silveira Serpa, at that time when she was working with Litquake in San Francisco, she helped us organize a reading as well. So it was so many people who helped put these things together, and we're really fortunate to know each other, and we wouldn't know each other if it wasn't for Disquiet.
Sure. Indeed. Well, that's good news that Paula's coming to the West Coast. We have to publicize that, Paula, and get it out to, and indeed, let's organize some. I'll be more than happy to help out wherever I can. But I do believe, and we'd like to actually start some in-person events at Fresno State. We have a good venue with our Master of Fine Arts program, where right now actually we have 2 Portuguese Americans in creative writing, and so hopefully we can do we can serve as a venue to bring writers together, because being in Central California, where it's close to everyone, so we'd like to do that. And I think we're going to come up to the end. We're just about on the hour, and I want to thank both Tyler and Tony. A quick question: any projects for publication in the near future, or in magazines or books, or any pieces? What's Tony, we'll start with you. You're smiling. So is there something coming up that you're working on? I'm sure with your technical writing, there's always something, but with your creative, technical is also creative. But with your fiction, and what are you working on anything? I think that we actually do need another anthology, like Luis Gonçalves and Carlos Matos published quite a few years ago. It was a lot of work for them, a lot of work. But I think that that's something that we are thinking at Bruma Publications out of Fresno State, is possibly an anthology that will include all of these voices of the Portuguese American world, because it's time. There's been some new voices that have appeared since the anthology that Luis and Carlo published, and I think that and also some of those are represented on there would probably be willing to be on another anthology as well. And anthologies are a good way to get into for younger writers and all writers to be known. Sometimes people just are interested in the Portuguese American experience, and they have an amalgam of works, all the way from poetry to fiction to creative nonfiction to memoirs, and so it's really a wonderful way to promote Portuguese American writing. But any projects, Tony?
I always have something going, although
Okay.
I don't submit much for publication anymore. You mentioned Laura Glardizon, and I guarantee I will have a message from her in the next 24 hours, pushing me to get something going. So
Sure. Well, I'll push if I have to myself, and we'll look at and think of Bruma, because we are thinking about also publishing. We're doing some academic, mostly academic pieces in the next few months, but we are looking at creative writing as well. Tyler, thoughts for publishing? I know your book is one that you've submitted, and any other projects that you're thinking about?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of another poetry project. It's going to be some sonnets, and it's actually sonnets and haikus. And because I was just happened to be reading a lot of sonnets and haikus, and I know that there's a significant Japanese influence on the Azores as well, which I don't know if you can actually maybe tell me a little bit more about that, so I have something to take on and keep me inspired and going down that route.
Sure, I can give you some information on that. Indeed, yeah. So let's first of all, again, thank you, Tony, and thank you, Tyler. Appreciate your time. Best of luck to you, and keep on writing, please. The world needs more writers, and I don't mean that lightly. I mean that totally seriously. The world needs more writers. We need more readers, obviously, but we also need writers, and we also need to pull these voices. It hasn't been always easy for lots of Portuguese American writers throughout the years, not just today, but in the last 50, 60 years. But there are more and more venues. Unfortunately, I just got an email a couple of days ago that Portuguese Heritage Publications of California, that Tyler mentioned, Henrique Denise and Tony Goulart and José de Couto Rodrigues, the organization is closing doors after being in a publishing world for over 20 years. But there are other avenues popping up, and we also, of course, need to get your work out to the mainstream media, mainstream America, because if you're of a Portuguese background, Hispanic background, Asian background, there's a lots that connect all of us, and your work is part of the American experience, and we appreciate both of you. Thank you so much for taking time. It was a pleasure having you both here at Fresno State, and we hope to keep in touch. And okay. Thanks to all of you for joining us here and on the Facebook Live. Our next event is actually tomorrow. Just a bit of info. We have an event tomorrow, which is